Good morning, and many thanks for joining our webinar today. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Richard Bates. I'm the Sales Director for EBS. And EBS as a business are proud to be your experienced technology partner. So as I said, if you don't know us, EBS have been established 44 years just. We're a very long standing Sage partner, and we've spent probably 35 years reselling Sage 50, Sage 200 products in various forms. We're also a Microsoft partner. We do IT managed services and have our own cloud offering, which is perfect for Sage 200. Today, we're joined with Sicon. We're going to be demonstrating to you the fixed assets and intercompany modules. Nikki's joined us, our account manager, so thanks ever so much, Nikki, for joining us, and also Michelle, who will be completing the demo, who's also from Sicon.
Good morning.
Good morning. So before I pass you over to Michelle, just quickly need to let you know from a housekeeping point of view, we are recording the session. We'll make that link available afterwards. It'll be on our YouTube page on our website. So if you do want to watch it again or share it internally to any colleagues, you'll be more than welcome to. We will be taking questions, so feel free to pop them into the chat, and we'll obviously, if any questions come in, we'll answer them towards the end of the session. So I think that's everything I've got to add to this. So Michelle, if you're ready to share your screen, and I'll obviously pass over to Michelle for the demonstration.
Thanks very much, Richard. I will take over from here. So let me just share my screen with you. So hopefully you should now see my screen in front of you. So the first screen that you're seeing is actually the fixed asset register. So just a little bit of a introduction to you to what we're actually looking at today. We're going to cover both the fixed asset module and intercompany. We'll do fixed assets first, and just a little bit about what fixed assets is. If you already have a fixed asset register, you either are maintaining that on an Excel spreadsheet, or you may be using other fixed asset tools which sit outside of Sage. And I suppose there is also, for those of you that have Sage 200 and have had it for quite some time, you'll know that there is also a fixed asset module inside of Sage 200 itself, where we extend that functionality. So we'll do all the normal things that you would expect from a fixed asset register. You'll be able to forecast, you'll be able to depreciate. But actually ours is not only a financial tool, it is also a register for you so that you can maintain those assets and track those assets through your business. So what you're seeing on the screen at the moment is the fixed asset register. There's a number of different things that any business that's using a fixed asset register or requires fixed assets will want to be able to do. And we're going to try and cover a few of those off for you today. So within this register, you'll probably see that I have a number of different things and a number of different number conventions set up in terms of what a fixed asset is. In here, you can set up what is essentially fixed assets within categories. And then your categories will have a number of subcategories within them. Behind those categories, you'll set the parameters for how you want to be able to report on that particular item. So you'll see in here that I've got a category description of some of these things. So my espresso machines sitting a category called coffee machines. These list views inside of Sage, I think are fantastic, underutilized. And so you can use this as your live dashboard. Ultimately, it means that you'd be then able to add some kind of filter to it. So if I only wanted to see those assets within a particular category, that's exactly what I'm going to be able to do. And these filters, these list views, can be shared from user to user, or they can become private. What we're going to do is we're going to have a look at one of my assets, and you can see on here it's my Jaguar XJR. And within that particular asset itself, you can see that it has a net book value. It has an accumulated depreciation. So we've already created this asset. It's already partway through its life cycle, and we've already depreciated on it. So let's just go in and have a little look at it. So we're just going to pop in and amend that asset. And you'll see that when we go in and do that, there are a number of tabs which appear on the screen for you. So setup and all of these things which we're going to have a little look at now. The first thing that we want to know is where does my asset sit within my business the category, the subcategory, is it a live asset? When did we purchase it? What was the capitalization date? And then the depreciation type. So there are a number of algorithms already preset into the system to represent the different depreciation types which you might cover. So straight line life is the one that I've got here, but you can also have your reducing balance and your straight line percentage, etc., etc. And you can determine by category what your depreciation type is, or you can actually go in and say, right, okay, that's my default for that category, but on this particular occasion, we're going to use this depreciation type. And then, of course, you can segment your assets down and look at those assets within a particular category, within a particular depreciation type, to report on them effectively. What you'll notice in here is that having already depreciated on this asset, that the depreciation type is then grayed out. I can't change it just spuriously, but in its life cycle. There are some utilities, however, that we provide for you within the fixed asset utility that allows us to be able to change asset types and potentially change, write assets off, all of those types of things. So as you can see, the original cost value of my asset was £65,000, the last depreciation value of £1,805, the accumulated depreciation, and basically what it's left worth to us within our business as far as that asset is concerned. So this is what we keep a constant track of. In the setup, you'll see that we have the balance sheet postings, the P&L postings. These can be separated out as well. So if you do want to be able to recognize the depreciation against your asset, against multiple nominal codes, cost centers and departments, then I can do that. So I can go in here and I could add another, and I can also reduce that down. So if I just go in and edit that and say, actually 50% of it's going to go here, and then I add another nominal code in here. For the financial people on the call, I'm not choosing the right nominal codes, as you can probably see. We're just going to choose any nominal codes. But the reality is, this is all about your setup. And I can say, yeah, the other 50% is going to go here. So I can accept that in. We also have the ability to be able to link our asset to a project. If you're using Sicon projects, we can, of course, use that project number and project header to post depreciation directly to project costing. And also within this screen, you'll notice that there is the ability for me to be able to associate purchase ledger transactions to potentially the purchase of this item. So despite the fact that this cost me £65,000, I may have actually paid for that across 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or a year's worth of finance, resulting in 12 invoices that are related to the purchase of my asset. So I can do that. So I can add an existing transaction. I can create a new invoice from here as well. So there's a complete link directly to everything that we do inside of Sage. We can also determine the location, the associated employee. Because this is a vehicle and sits in a category called vehicles, we also switch on 3 more tabs for you. They're not apparent for all assets, just for my vehicle category. So I've got my vehicle register. I've got my accident log. And this is again where our solution for fixed assets extends itself from what you would potentially have directly inside of Sage or other Excel spreadsheets, so that you can physically manage your asset. So the vehicle register, the accident log, the planned preventive maintenance tabs allows me to add extra information into my asset so that I can manage it. We've got a full history of everything that's gone on. So I can filter that down by transaction type. So if I just wanted to look at when it's changed its employee. So in here in the setup, having associated this particular one to Joe Bloggs. So he's the current owner, in inverted commas, of my Jaguar. Well, actually, what we might want to do is say, actually, that now is under the custody of Kim, and that would then enter that into the transaction history for management. We're also able to manage and create insurance categories, maintenance providers, who the insurer is, but more significantly, the ability for you to be able to add any other maintenance costs to my asset. This doesn't affect your net book value, but it does enable you to then be able to see what the cost of that asset has been throughout its life cycle. So when we make decisions in terms of our considerations for when we write it off or when we want to sell that asset, that we can actually see exactly how much it's cost us throughout its life cycle. So adding maintenance items in here allows me to be able to say, right, where did the service come from? This is, of course, your purchase ledger, the date that that took place, what the fault description or whatever it was. So let's just say that it was a service. I can add a cost in here, £1,500 service. And I could just say it's a £1,500 service. It does not need to, if you don't want it to, represent any transaction. It's a cost that we are just putting against the asset. However, to tidy everything up, we can add an existing invoice, or we can create a new invoice directly from these screens. I'm just simply going to save that one away. We, of course, can add attachments, memos, and then we're going to see our forecast based on our periods. We can have multiple analysis codes. I've got an example here of my asset group as being driver services. And again, what this then enables you to do is to then be able to report on a number of different groups of assets within a category, therefore within an analysis code. We also have a couple of tabs which are actually unique to you. So you can create, I've got an example here of a tab called tracking. This is actually a custom tab and one that you can actually create the fields for. So you can actually have, I think it's up to 60 different fields of date fields and tick boxes and text fields, etc., so that you can hold additional information to that we've already given you. So in this particular case, I've said this is a tracking utility and enables me to track the date that it's due back, the number of miles that it's traveled, etc., etc. But again, it just makes that whole process of managing your asset incredibly easy. Then we'll get to the more mundane things that we would do. So let's just close out of that and say no, that we don't want to save it. So the more mundane things that we do with a fixed asset, I, of course, am going to be able to post the depreciation for my assets on a monthly basis. And we go into our period routines, period end routines. We can perform a year end, but this is the one that you would probably do on a monthly basis. And because we are completely integrated into the accounting system manager inside of Sage, you are only able to post to those periods which are then open for you. So we create a new column within the accounting system manager for you to be able to manage your fixed assets. And that ultimately means that I'm then going to be able to display all of my depreciation. I can simply go ahead and do exactly that and post the depreciation. There is the ability for me to be able to hold on to it, to create a holding bay so that I can second guess it before it actually goes through as a journal. But the reality is that I'm simply going to say, yep, go ahead and post my depreciation on all of my assets. And that period is then done. What it will then do for me is create automatically the posted depreciation report. And these are pre-existing reports that we've created inside of the module for you. Once you've depreciated on that, close that period down, that period will not be available for you anymore. And it really is as simple as that. In terms of the asset itself, I can, of course, create new assets. I can amend an asset. When you create a new asset, there's a number of different ways in which you might do that. You can bring assets in via an import. We have a number of utilities that enable us to bring in from a CSV file your assets. There is a template for that so that we can actually then transfer what you've got on a spreadsheet, what you've got on another solution, what you've got inside of Sage into the fixed asset module. But in addition to that, as well as being able to bring assets in and be able to create assets, we can also issue stock to a fixed asset. So if you are the type of organization that equally sells things that you might also provide to your customers as assets for yourself. So I'm thinking of those types of organizations where, like, the coffee machine is a classic example. So in the case where you would potentially provide the coffee machine, the big barista thing that goes out to the major coffee providers that we all go to. I won't mention any names, but those big machines are very often sold to large organizations. That's great. It's our stock. We're going to sell it. Sometimes, however, we provide the coffee that goes in it, but the actual machine itself is our asset essentially loaned to you. So in those cases, the ability for you to be able to issue your own stock to an asset and replenish your asset stock enables us to be able to manage that effectively. So there are utilities for us to be able to do that. In terms of, again, the more mundane things that you would do with an asset, we've posted the depreciation. You'll notice inside of the utilities that we have the ability to generate forecasts as well, and there's a whole ream of reports that sit behind that for us. But then in terms of the management of my asset, these are the things which are closed down to you within the amending of the asset, which you have to go through a certain process for. So if I do want to be able to dispose of a fixed asset, then I can select the reason for the disposal, that being a sale or a write-off. What that will then do is change the status of my asset. As you can see, I've got one down here that's been written off already, but I don't lose that history. It's still in my asset register. However, I can also sell an asset, and I can also associate the sale of that asset to a sales invoice as well. I'm just going to go into write-off, and the reason for the write-off, let's just call it end of period. I don't like disposing of all of my assets in my demo environment, but the reality is that we will go in and do some of those. So we're going to show all of the assets within a particular category. You'll see that within my cleaning equipment, I have some vacuum cleaners, some washing machines, some mops and some polishers. And as you can see over here, the net book value appears for me, and I can decide which assets it is that I'm about to write off. I can review the journal for that. There are a number of postings that sit in the background in terms of the setup of what you do that we will then follow when we go ahead and dispose of that asset. Essentially, what that will do is do all of the correct postings for you, enabling you to select a number of different things all at the same time to go in and write off the assets. It itself will recategorize the asset into a status of written off, allowing you to have full history and writing off and doing all of the postings. I won't go ahead and write off. I'll keep them in there. The next thing that we may also do is the revaluing of a fixed asset. For this, we provide you a little wizard. It will go through the following processes to select your asset, to look at the nominal settings, so what it is that you've already set up as the defaults for the nominal settings and what we're then going to do, the valuation amounts, and then the summary. If I just pop that through, you see again, I can go in and select any of my assets, the reason for the revaluation, the nominal postings that you've preset in the settings of fixed assets will then appear for you, and you can amend them if you need to. You'd then be able to go in and set your new cost value, your new accumulative appreciation value, and therefore your new net book value. And then as you go ahead and post that, it'll then show you what the effect of, if you'd actually changed any of the figures, it would of course show you what the net effect of those postings is going to be, and ultimately allow you to then finish that without, obviously I didn't change anything, so it's not going to regenerate any forecasts with anything different, but that whole process is then managed for you. So I'm just going to take you in just very quickly and show you inside of the settings of fixed assets where all of these things take place. Here, as I mentioned, are those algorithms preset into the system for our depreciation types. The status of the assets, the ones, some of them are hard coded, so when it's live, when it's sold, when it's written off. But I've also created in my status of assets a number of other statuses that you might go through. So in construction, for example, if you are building a building, if you're a school, as an example, building an outbuilding, then potentially what you want to do is capture all of the costs that go into doing that without fully having a live asset at that point. So this one here is not live. At the point at which it then becomes live, I can then change the status of the asset to be live, and it's only the live ones which are then depreciated. So we have a capability to be able to manage that all the way through the process. In your posting options, this is again where we can go in and say whether or not it is posting to projects or indeed project accounting. There's a number of different settings that sit in the background to determine how you want to use the system, whether or not you want to allow zero cost assets, for example, and an explanation against each one of these as to why you might use that. In your depreciation postings, as you can see, we have one journal per asset, one journal for all assets or group assets by nominal, and post one journal for each group. So you have an option there. A number of analysis codes which you can preset. And in simple terms, that's fixed assets. As I mentioned before, there are a number of pre-configured reports for you. You can add to these reports. Your business partner can add to those reports for you. We can redesign those. But ultimately, if I just wanted to have a look at my detail, I can look at my list of assets. And again, we adopt all of the same things that the normal Sage reporting does so that you can filter that down and report specifically against categories, subcategories, locations, employees, etc., etc. So there's a whole ream of these. We'll be happy to share what those reports are with you. And if there's anything specific that you need, again, speak to Richard or Darren and the team there. One more thing. Because it's completely integrated into Sage, I just want to take you into the purchase ledger, because when fixed assets is switched on, when we go in and actually enter in a brand new invoice, which we will do here for these guys at 2020 Signs, you'll see that we've got an additional tab at the bottom of the screen that says save it as a fixed asset. What that essentially means is that at the same time as processing my invoice, I can create my asset and it will automatically link this transaction to the asset. Let's just go in and put a £6,000 asset into here, or an invoice into here. Again, we're just going to go in and rather than saying save to that, we'll say saved as a fixed asset. And it again gives me two options. Either save it as a brand new asset and create the asset at that point, or you can save it as that maintenance item on an existing asset, associating cost to my asset throughout its life cycle. We're just going to go in and say, yep, save as a new asset. I've got another utility switched on in here, guys, for my approvals system. So that was that one just popping up on the screen. But there's your new asset. And again, let's try and be creative today. We'll have an iPhone 11 in here. Gosh, I'm showing my age now. Let's have an iPhone. I think an iPhone 11 is up to date. It's clearly not. So again, your category is where it comes into play. So we'll pop that into IT equipment. We should probably have a subcategory for phones, but I'll just pop it into iPads just for the purpose of today's exercise. Your description, your serial number, your manufacturer, make, model can all be identified at this point. Your depreciation type, as I mentioned, can be changed because I haven't yet saved it and depreciated for the first time. So the default from the category is presented to you, but I can change it. My date of purchase is automatically created off the back of that invoice. And again, we're just going to go in here and say, yeah, it is straight line life, and we'll have it as 36 periods. And then the date of the first depreciation will just pop in here as being the 30th of November. Any other information that I would like, you can see the cost value isn't pre-populated from the invoice. And the good reason for that, because actually, as I mentioned before, you may be actually paying for that asset over a number of different invoices. So it may not be fully reflective of what that actual invoice value is. So we're just going to enter ourselves a cost value in here of £5,500. That's a very expensive iPhone. I do appreciate that. The postings, as I mentioned before, in terms of where it sits on the balance sheet, where it sits in the P&L, are all represented as the defaults. I can associate it to a person or to a location. I can go into the purchase ledger transaction itself, which is now linked automatically to this particular transaction. I can enter in any planned preventive maintenance. But if I simply say save to that now, as you can see, this is another one of my Modules just popping up on the screen. This is Sicon Documents. I've told the system that there is an insurance document required on a fixed asset before I save it. So it's just warning me that I haven't saved one. So I'll say, yes, I do want to continue without that. And as you can see, it's now asking me for the job number because I've said it does need to be linked to a project. So again, we'll do exactly that. Do what we need to. And again, I'll put this to my asset depreciation header within my project. Don't have to use projects, guys. It's just that I've got all sorts of wonderful things switched on to show you. And again, this one here is my analysis code, which I've made mandatory. So again, forcing people to do a particular thing so that we can report on it effectively. And again, we're just going to choose out any one of these will do for the purpose of today's exercise, just to get me through the point of actually being able to create that asset. And there you go. There's my brand new asset, asset number 79, which has been created off the back of my invoice. If that invoice was in relation to multiple assets, it gives me an opportunity to create additional assets. I'll say no for the purpose of this exercise. My asset is now done. So there you go. Bit of a whistle-stop tour of fixed assets. We're now going to move on to our intercompany module. So before I move on to intercompany, I'm going to need to change my view so that we are looking at a slightly different company. So we're going to go and change my company, and you'll see that I've got a number of different companies set up specifically for me to be able to demonstrate what intercompany does for you. It's aimed at businesses with a requirement to transact between multiple Sage companies. Whether it's, for example, apportioning the purchase invoice or posting the management fees, the solution provides you with an opportunity to simultaneously post complementary transactions within those relevant companies. By removing the need for multiple duplication when entering data, this is not only reduces the risk of errors, but it's also the relevant postings are made instantly without you having to log in and log out of those companies. So when I say that I'm into company A, so for the purpose of today's exercise, that's Michelle 1. We're just going to pop into intercompany, and the devil is in the detail. So I'm going to take you directly into the intercompany module first, just so that we can have a look and see what that detail is, and into those control accounts. In here, what you're essentially doing is telling the system how you want to talk to the other companies in your group. So I have a number of companies, as we can see, but it's only these ones here that I've said that I'm going to be able to talk to. So when company A puts on a transaction, we want to be able to talk to company B and company C. I've got different iterations of what company B might look like depending on the base currency as well. So these are all different companies, and just to represent for you, these ones are actually different base currency because we can handle that conversion from one to the other. The other thing that this also shows us is the tax registration number. So in terms of how we're going to post the transactions, it could be a simple journal, or it could be that we need a purchase invoice in one company and a sales invoice in the other to represent those transactions. And the difference between the two is dependent on this tax registration number. If the tax registration number of the other company within your group is the same as company C is, then it only requires a simple journal on both sides. If, however, the tax registration number differs, as mine does with company B, then we will create a purchase invoice and a sales invoice in the receiving company, all within one transaction. What then sits behind each of these is the ability for you to then define the defaults. So from a sales ledger perspective, what is so remember, this is company B with a different tax registration number that is going to require purchase and sales invoices. Therefore, we need to know what those companies are, the control account is in the corresponding company. And that's what we're looking at here. When you look at this, you will see this is indeed my sales ledger. Likewise with the purchase ledger and with the nominal, there is also the ability for you to do stock transfers from one company to another, and then bank transfers, so money going from one company to another as well. There is also that integration to projects. So there's your defaults, the devil in that detail. Also, whether or not those other companies are VAT rated and how we're going to represent that. And then to give you an example of what intercompany is capable of doing, what we're going to do is just pop ourselves directly into the purchase ledger, and we're going to assume that an invoice has arrived in company A, but there is liability on some of that cost to other companies within our group. So rather than me posting the invoice and paying it from company A and then saying in company B and company C that there's some liability there, so having to log out and log back in and do the corresponding transactions, with the intercompany module, we're going to be able to do all of that within company A. So let's just pop ourselves in for Everest. We'll put on a new invoice for Everest. You'll see that there's an intercompany transaction utility that sits up here. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're just going to say that this invoice is going to be an intercompany transaction. It's for £2,000. And at the point at which I click save, because that radio button has been clicked to say yes, the intercompany module is going to kick in. So we'll say yes to that, and then we'll decide what we're going to do with that transaction. So how much of that transaction is going to be apportioned to the other companies? We have two options for split postings and sequential postings. Split postings is the most normal, 99 times out of 100, 999 times out of 1,000. It's always split postings. Sequential postings is used where you want to be able to recognize the expenditure within one company fully, and then fully recognize it in another company, and then fully recognize it in the final company. I think that's called money laundering in some circumstances, but for us, it is an option, but rarely used. So the split postings allows us to say, out of that £2,000 invoice, company B needs £500, company C needs £800. We're going to be left with £700 in company A, and we're going to do all of the postings that are required in order for you to be able to transact in this way without us having to log into separate companies to do that. So at the point at which I click next, the first thing that it will say to me is there is indeed £700 left. Are you absolutely sure? I'll say yes to that. Now the system's going away and working out what it needs to do with those transactions based on whether or not they're the same tax registration number. Do we need purchase invoices? Do we need sales invoices? And the result is presented to us on the screen with the defaults that we've set up in the system. So this is company A talking to company B, and therefore going to the intercompany control account for company A inside of company B. If, however, that is differing, what you are able to do is change it at this point, if you've got permission to do so. So what you're currently looking at here is actually company B's nominal structure without us having to be in that company. We're going to leave it as it is. You'll see that the tax has also been calculated because it is VAT rated. But the result of this one, because they're two differing tax registration numbers, is that we're going to get a purchase invoice in company B and a sales invoice in company A, all within this same transaction. It'll then go through and it'll look at what we need to do with company C. And because company C has the same tax registration number, it's going to be a simple journal. So I'm happy that the result of what we're going to do from an intercompany perspective is exactly how I want to post it. So I'm just going to say, yes, indeed, go in and show me the summary of that. And we'll see all 4 transactions that are going to take place. In our operating company, company A, we have our sales invoice and a journal. In our receiving companies, company B has a purchase invoice and company C has a corresponding journal. And all of those postings that are going to take place. If I'm happy again with that, I can simply say post to that and it'll go away and do everything that I've just instructed the system to do. If I'm not happy, I can go backwards and second guess the system and change any of the settings and the defaults that we have. I'm simply going to say post to that, and off it will go and do exactly that for me and create all of the transactions that I mentioned. So there they are, all on the screen, all posted to our separate companies. The intercompany module, as I mentioned, isn't just about creating transactions off the back of an invoice. There are a number of other things that you can do. So the first thing that we're going to do is actually pop into the intercompany module. That was difficult to say. So we're just going to pop ourselves into the intercompany module, and you'll see those other things that we're able to do. Firstly, in the cash book, we can do a simple bank transfer, money from one account or one company to another company. We could, however, also do the pay and receive of transactions, or the receive, transfer and allocate of transactions. Ultimately, what this means is that I can, in the terms of sales, I can receive money into my bank account in company A, which relates to transactions in other companies within my group. Equally, on the purchase side, I can spend money out of my bank account, company A's bank account, which again relates to transactions in our other operating companies' purchase invoice transactions. So again, that's more than possible. We're going to go in and do a simple account transfer. And for the purpose of today's exercise, we'll take some money out of my main bank account. I've taken a lot of money out of my main bank account in company A. And this time I'm going to say that I want to put that into another company that has a different base currency. Could be the same, but I'm going to choose a slightly different one because I just want you to see that when we do move money from our bank account to company B's main bank account, which is a euro base currency, that it will take the exchange rate that you have in the system, allows me to override that exchange rate if I need to. We'll put in a description. Test for Richard is Richard's famous in my system. And we're just going to go in here and put in a reference number, the date that I'd like the transfer to take place, the payment amount of, let's say, £2,000 from my main bank account that I'm moving to company B. And when I push that through, you'll see it takes the exchange rate entered in and says the receipt value in euros into company B is going to be 2,222 euros. And very simply, as we save that away, you can see the transfer is now complete. A couple of other things. Again, inside of intercompany, in my stock control, I can do a batch stock batch stock transaction, or I can simply do a transfer of stock, one company, company A, to another company. Only prerequisite here is that the item description in company A needs to be the same in the corresponding company. And essentially all we're doing there is transferring stock from one company to another. Last thing, because this is what lots of people will need to do inside of intercompany, is transacting from one company to another when you are purchasing things from another company within your group. So you are the sales group, you are the people that are actually selling item one, but actually it's another company in your group that manufactures item one. So potentially what we're going to be able to do, and again, just to represent that for you, I've got a pre-existing transaction just to show you. If I want to sell something to my customer, but I want to create a back-to-back purchase order on the other company within my group to manufacture that and sell it to me, then I'm going to be able to do all of that in one place. To do the back-to-back does actually require another piece of software. It's part of our enhancement pack. And again, your business partner there, Richard or Darren, can advise you as to what that might look like. But in simple terms, if I just go into my sales order list and we look at, so this one here, where we are talking to the other company, where we're raising a sales order on the other company, we'll get a corresponding purchase order on our company, doesn't require the back-to-back. But when you're selling it to your end customer and you want to then buy it off of the other company in your group, so my Better Kitchens one is a good example of that, I believe. It might actually be better if I look at the King Standing one. Let's just have a quick look at that, because that's been fully allocated. We're just going to go in and have a look at that sales order. And we should see that we have an additional tab that sits at the top of this sales order called my back-to-back intercompany transaction. Essentially what we're doing is selling our stock item to King Standing Kitchens. The result of having done that, however, means that we have created a number of intercompany transactions. So we end up with a sales order in intercompany A, my company, to sell it to my customer. We also end up with, in intercompany A purchase order on company B. And then we also end up with an intercompany B sales order. So my second company is selling the item to me. We're buying it off of company B and selling it to our customer. That's quite a convoluted way of looking at it, guys, but that's what many organizations will do. And they manage that with separate transactions, purchase orders and sales orders. What we do is one simple transaction, one sales order, one back-to-back utility that enables all three of those transactions to take place. That's intercompany in a nutshell, guys. There's again a number of other things that you could potentially look at with intercompany. Primarily, the one we obviously put a transaction in directly into the purchase ledger as a purchase invoice. But of course, there is also the ability for you to be able to go in and create standard journals and journal templates. So if you do want to apportion your electricity bill, if you do want to apportion your salary bill across multiple companies, then the utility for intercompany is designed exactly to enable you to do that. So in the nominal ledger, in my advanced intercompany journal, I can say I want to use a pre-existing template, one that we've created. I'll look at my electricity apportionment and you'll see that it is indeed pre-existing and telling me what it is that we're going to do with it. And the end result of that is that it's going to give you the option again to make any amendments that you need to, but you essentially end up with the intercompany transaction in exactly the same way. So if we just put £100 in here, I'm not going to follow this one through all to the end, guys, because I've got some project stuff switched on that it requires some setup for, but we're just going to click next to that just so that you can actually see that it's also looking at those deferred periods, future periods in other companies. So again, in my demo environment, I haven't actually closed down any periods in any of the corresponding companies. So it's just warning me that it's going to post to a future period. So I'm just going to say yes to that. I just wanted you to see the result of what the template gives me. It knows, based on the percentages that I've already set up in the background of the template, that £30 is going to go to intercompany B and £70 is going to go to company C. And that's basically intercompany in a nutshell, guys. There's lots of other things that we could potentially talk about by way of reporting. Some of the other things that we've looked at today with Sicon documents switched on as well. I'd invite you to speak to Richard or to Darren and come back to if they've got any questions. And I'm happy to answer any other questions that you might have today.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you ever so much, Michelle. That was fantastic. Yeah, really good overview there of the two modules. I don't think we've had any questions come in as of yet. So obviously it was an exceptionally comprehensive demonstration that's covered everything that everybody could possibly want to know. But as you say, if you do have any questions, feel free to contact us here at EBS. You can do that via our website, which is ebs.tech. Myself and Darren and some of the other guys and girls here can assist. Obviously, we run these webinars frequently. They're available on our website. So please keep an eye out for any of the new webinars that we've got coming up and you can register. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you and speaking to you soon with other demonstrations.
Thanks very much for your time, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.